I think the exciting concept on how to think about recessions as a real opportunity for growth and getting competitive distance. Similar to the concept of, if you look at the Giro d'Italia, where you have cyclists running out and running in the plane, and they are, while you're in the plane, nobody is making distance. Everyone is together. But now the mountains is coming, and the mountain is a little bit like the recession. So you come to the mountains, and the ones who are resilient, who have kind of the strengths, they are getting distance from the group. And when we are through the recession at the top of the mountain, where we go into the plane again, now the field has separated. And I think that's how we need to think about the struggles we're seeing at the moment coming ahead of us as a real opportunity to create this competitive distance.
I think what it got me thinking about was resilience in the context of human capital and particularly leadership. So, how do we actually ensure that organizations have more resilient individuals, more resilient leaders?
How can I translate this uncertainty and disruption that we see into something positive? How do we leverage the pivot of the supply chains to promote different agricultural methods for our agricultural clients? How do we rethink mobility? How do we leverage different sources of energy? How do we accelerate the environmental transition to be less reliant on some sources of energy?
Most of my conversation touched on energy and climate technologies. Given that we are on a path towards net zero, that is irrevocable, but at the same time we have energy shortage. So the implications of shortage of natural gas, will natural gas be a transition fuel? What's the role of hydrogen? Short term, but also longer term, we will see really technologies at an inflection point. And all my discussions touched upon the one or other way on like the energy transition and also the role of climate technologies in that transition.
This notion of needing to invest in brown to get to green. And so meeting with one executive, the notion that the only way we're going to manage this transition well is to give people, a decade or two's roadmap so that we can continue to invest in things like the energy required for today with technology like carbon sequestration, so that we can get to more green technologies and we don't leave people behind.
For me, it was all about sustainability and how do we use technology to solve a lot of the topics we are facing at the moment. Sustainability, becoming more resilient, but also becoming more productive and competitive in an inflationary environment. And we had a lot of talks about that literally technology is a silver lining that can solve all these things, and not just one of them, but in a fashion kind of simultaneously.
I do diversity, equity, and inclusion. There was a lot of talk on inclusion, and I think a couple of thoughts come to my mind. Broad definition of inclusion, how to measure inclusion, and some people were suggesting to go into scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, inclusion measures. And also a great lot of discussion on how inclusion and serving inclusive customers can unlock growth.
So we talked a lot about the need for growth and how we are unapologetic about growth and also unapologetic about the role of business in creating growth. But at the same time, the challenge is how do you create growth that is helpful for sustainability, right? So it benefits the planet and also is more equitable, so benefits people as well. And how do you do all those things at once, recognizing that there are actually puts and takes between those three things?
These leaders, again, thought through what we need to do and what organizations and, again, governments and citizens need to do to really help be a more sustainable environment, a sustainable organization. But they loved the push from us around how can you be sustainable while also being inclusive and never forgetting about growth. Growth is a good thing for organizations. Growth is a good thing for society. How can we bring the and together for sustainability and inclusivity and growth? It was a great set of dialogues around that.
The implications on the economic ecosystem from an end-to-end perspective of the Russian invasion in the Ukraine and the war in the Ukraine are not yet fully understood in terms of when one domino stone falls, what are the implications across the whole economic ecosystems? And this is something I think where we can also contribute to think that through.
The future of Europe, and not necessarily from the perspective of the immediate crisis in terms of energy and other things, but based on the report that we have co-authored with MGI around the growing technology and corporate performance gap between Europe and in particular the US.
India as a global tech services and digital powerhouse. India as a factory for the world in the face of disrupting supply chains. India's large domestic market as its real growth driver. These are all the themes that were prevalent at Davos. And then India's road ahead, albeit an onerous road, but an exciting road, and the agenda of driving sustainable and inclusive growth in a country of 1.5 billion people.
I spent a lot of my time with a lot of the African delegates at Davos. And the big question was, the recognition that we've gone through quite a difficult time over the last 10 years. So the big debate we've had and question has been, how do we continue to get the continent back on a path of strong, sustainable and inclusive growth? So that's a real question. And we debated it at length. We actually had a McKinsey breakfast on Africa with a number of attendees, including some presidents, some prime ministers, a number of CEOs, where we debated this.
I had a lot of questions on China as the China representative from McKinsey. I think that everyone's very curious as to, are we looking at a new era in China? Are the past 20, 30 years, the rules that we have been accustomed to, will that change? I think people were quite interested in what's the investment outlook, right, in China, and are the golden years behind us, right? And so that was a good discussion.